The Kremlin announced that they do plan to meet with President Trump and Vladimir Putin. And obviously, the overall principle is to deal with the ceasefire. And they plan to meet just coming up in the next few days. Is this a genuine step forward as it relates to peace with the Russians in Ukraine? Well, joining me now to discuss this and much more is Congressman Warren Davidson. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Financial Services Committee. He represents the 8th Congressional District of the great state of Ohio. Congressman Davidson, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you, my friend.
Definitely an honor to join you, and great that you're hosting today. Nice to spend time with you.
Well, thank you, Warren. Let's start with your thoughts on this potential, at least, face-to-face meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin. Do you think this is a genuine, good faith effort towards peace?
Well, it's really encouraging. I mean, President Trump came in and look, peace through strength. He was a very strong president in his first term. He's been even stronger in his second term. But he laid out a very clear objective in Ukraine. He just wants peace. He wants to restore a state of peace. He wants people to stop dying. Under the Biden administration, you had everything from that on the one hand to regime change in Russia on the other. No Russians in Ukraine, no Russians in Ukraine or Crimea. And we kept doing this hollow slogan, as much as it takes, as long as it takes, which is a great way to fund an endless war. If we're not going to fight it, we seemed committed to at least cutting the checks for it. So thankfully, President Trump's brought real leadership here. I know he's been frustrated, particularly with President Putin lately, but he had a lot of wrestling to get Zelensky to the negotiating table and in a negotiating state of mind as well. I hope that they can restore peace, and I think it's a good thing when President Trump sits down with people. I mean, I know you've been in the room with him. No one negotiates a deal and makes people want to say yes more effectively that I've met. I mean, I think he's going to give every chance for it to work.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And, I agree with you, too, about the frustration. There's got to be frustration. It seems like, to be honest, Russia just seems to be all over the map, and Putin seems to be all over the place. How do you think the Trump administration has so far approached Russia? Do you think it's been effective, would you say?
Yeah, I think, look, he's made it very clear that he's got expectations for Zelensky, too. And I think Russia didn't want to come to a negotiation where they felt like it was all give by Russia. And they had already tried to have some state of peace. And Western governments basically scuttled an effort for peace in the early stages of the war. Russia's mostly been clear in saying that they don't want Ukraine to be part of NATO. They would prefer that Ukraine's not part of the European Union, but they're very committed that they don't become part of NATO. And a lot of NATO countries want Ukraine to be part of NATO. Ukraine says they want to be part of NATO, but I think President Trump's very clear that's not going to happen on his watch, and certainly not when there's a state of war there. So that at least has Putin receptive. But the other thing, when you look at economic interest there, Russia's export is energy. President Trump wants to export energy. So you're like, well, we're kind of wanting to do the same things here. Russia has plenty of rare earth minerals, but to the extent there are some, it's in areas where Russia was invading Ukraine. The United States basically negotiated a deal for those rare earth minerals to take that out of reach and off the table without drawing the United States into conflict with Russia. But on the other side, both of those kinds of things serve as opportunities for Russia to do something different. And then lastly, note that this comes at a time when President Trump started squeezing India. And India is one of the key export markets for Russian energy. So they've been cut off from a lot of energy. They've lost a lot of business, and they've lost every kind of connection to the Western world in the wake of this war. So President Trump has said, look, I think we should find a way to include Russia into the world trade framework, and we should have a way to have some forgiveness and restoration of these relationships. And I think that's the olive branch. And President Trump's also made clear with the strike in Iran, well, he's got sticks too.
Very interesting, connecting some of those dots. We'll see how all these pieces come together. While I have you, Congressman Davidson, more domestic news. You're part of financial services and I'm sure you're keenly aware that President Trump signed a new executive order guaranteeing fair banking for all Americans. I know this is something that you've been involved with for quite some time. Give me your thoughts on this debanking executive order.
Well, it's necessary. The reality is people were losing access to banking, and particularly conservatives. Basically, it was the Biden enemies list. And this wasn't new. It was termed Choke Point 2.0 because under President Obama, they had Choke Point, Operation Choke Point. This is a code word for basically directing the bank regulators who have coercive power over banks to say, well, we don't want to bank those people. And, you know, sadly, if you think about it from a civil rights perspective, people from across the political spectrum and racial, religious lines, things like that, have been those people, and they were denied access to banking. But in the case here, it wasn't just you weren't getting loans. They wouldn't even take deposits from conservatives. They were literally closing off access. And it wasn't just like conservatives, but it was crypto in particular. Barney Frank, who was the Democrat from Massachusetts, pretty far left of center Democrat, but he was chairman of the House Financial Services Committee when Democrats were in the majority for the Dodd-Frank Act. And he was on the board of Signature Bank, and they were basically shut down by the Biden administration. And he said it wasn't because we weren't solvent, it was because we were banking crypto. So this kind of war on the Biden enemies list needs to end, and we need to follow up in the House Financial Services Committee and pass laws that make it impossible for bank regulators to do this without somebody going to jail.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see this taking place. I personally have known folks impacted by this, as I'm sure you have as well. And frankly, there ought to be bipartisan support. I mean, everyone ought to, your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, as you mentioned, Barney Franks, there ought to be agreement now on this, you would think. We'll see how that comes up. If I can, let me hit another big issue President Trump has been making waves about also with this mid-decade census that he's putting together. This time, of course, it will be excluding illegal immigrants. You agree with this? Why is this a necessary move?
Oh, Jody, I'm so excited about this. I've had a bill since I've been in Congress trying to get the census so that when they count it, they at least count everybody. I want you to count the illegals because I want to know where they are. We can ship them on out. But when you draw maps for Congress, it needs to be based on U.S. citizens only. I represent U.S. citizens. I don't care even if you're here legally, personally, you've got an embassy or a consulate that represents you. I represent U.S. citizens, and so does everyone else in the United States Congress. So, but right now, the map's based on everyone who happens to be here, and California is picking up, 6 or 7 extra seats. That's more than a lot of states have for representatives. And to be fair, Arizona and Texas and other states are picking up because they have large non-citizen populations as well. And you need an honest map. The honest map has U.S. citizens drawn in it. And to get an honest map, you've got to be able to do an honest census. And President Trump tried to set the conditions for this in his first term. He was blocked by the courts. And we need to really, it highlights the urgency that Congress really should be looking at President Trump's leadership and his executive orders. And we ought to be voting on 2 or 3 of those executive orders every week we're in session. But this is one of the most urgent things. And I will say, I'll commend my colleague Chuck Edwards, who's been a great ally on this since he got to Congress.
Well, I wish we had more time to hit on all of this, Congressman Davidson. But real quickly, and we've only got about a minute or so left, but the Texas State House is making all sorts of big news with Democrats there fleeing to Illinois to prevent a quorum so that state can move forward on redistricting, as you brought up. Real quickly, what's your thoughts on that? Where is this all going to go? What impact could it have nationally?
Well, look, district maps can be partisan. In Ohio, our Constitution recognizes they can be partisan. If there's bipartisan agreement on the maps when the first census is done, then the maps hold for 10 years. But if there's not bipartisan consensus, then the maps are only good for 4 years. So Ohio's in the process of redrawing them. That's our Constitution. But if it weren't for double standards, Democrats wouldn't have any. Illinois' maps are very gerrymandered, very skewed for Democrats. And Texas is basically saying, well, we can do that too.
Wow. Congressman Warren Davidson of Ohio, always great to see you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy district time right now and traveling schedule with Codels and so forth. Thank you for joining us on Washington Watch. Great to have you.
Yeah, definitely an honor. God bless you and all your listeners and viewers.